Good morning and welcome to Quest Television and Quest 93.1 FM. It is the 12th day in the month of June 2023. A lovely Monday morning here in the studios and another Monday morning for us to look into the newspapers. My name is Orikami Mariam and this is the paper review on Quest today. Today in the studios we have 5 newspapers. We have The Guardian, The Nation, we have the Daily Trust, the Punch newspaper and also the Vanguard newspaper. And fortunately I will be the only one on air for the newspaper review this morning. With that being said, let's head straight into the papers. The first paper for review is the Daily Trust, a newspaper you can trust, with the major headline which is talking about Democracy Day as it states, "Bear with me on subsidy removal, Tinubu tells Nigerians." The writers there says promises investments in power, transportation, healthcare and others. Pays tribute to Abiola, Yaradua and others. And use gains to deepen Nigeria's democracy, says IBB. Atiku and Obi react. Well, all of this you can read on page 4 of the Daily Trust newspaper. Moving above the leading story, we have on speakership, Betara and Gadi step down for APC's Abbas. I know you're interested in that. You can read all of that on page 16. Kano government resumes demolition of illegal structures. It's making it to page 5 of the Daily Trust. And on subsidy removal, it's a road transportation costs compete with air fares. You can read all of that on page 4. And that's the most we can take on the front page of the Daily Trust newspaper. The next paper for review is The Punch. And on The Punch, this newspaper this morning, the major story is talking about Democracy Day. As it says, Tinubu hails MKO Abiola and promises to ease subsidy removal pains. You can read all of that on page 2 of The Punch. Moving above the masthead, we have Presidency backs Christian Senate President, Betara and Gajidi step down. You can read all of that on page 2. And also over $56 billion lost to oil theft and subsidy, says advisory panel. More on that story you can read on page 31 of The Punch. DSS seizes Emefiele's passports and plans home and office search. It's making it to page 9 of The Punch newspaper this morning. And that's much we can take on the front page of The Punch. The next paper for review is The Guardian. And on The Guardian newspaper, the major headline reads, 30 years after, pro-democracy activists remind Tinubu of June 12 ideals. You can read all of that on page 6. Moving above the leading story, we have 60 years after, reality of United Africa hampered by xenophobia, says report. You can do that, read that story on page 2. On June 12th, Tinubu admirers and critics is an analysis you can get on page 4 of The Guardian. Nigeria's democracy imperfect but has scored gains, says the EU. Read more on that on page 3. Daunting expectations from Shonubi as CBN house cleaning begins. It's making it to page 6. Also, we have bureaucracy and shoddy preparation stall Nigerian air certification in stage 1. Read that story on page 3 of The Guardian newspaper. DSS lacks power to investigate and prosecute Emefiele, says Falano. It's quite an interesting one there, but you can do all of that on page 3 of The Guardian newspaper. And that's much we can take on the front page of The Guardian. The next paper for review is The Nation newspaper. And on The Nation newspaper this morning, the major headline reads, June 12, why we must defend our democracy by Tinubu. The writer there says, expect better deal from me. Judicial reform has started and Abiola's sacrifice should not be in vain. You can read on the front page and continue on page 33, page 4, page 5, page 49 and page 50 of The Nation newspaper. Moving above the masthead, we have Emefiele's exit and fireworks before suspension. It's making it to page 2 and 3 of The Nation. My Nigeria Air story by ex-minister Sirika. I'm sure you're interested in that. You can read all of that on page 6. Shatima's last-minute push swings support for Akpabio and Abbas. The writers there says Betara and Gajdi quit race. We have 72 senators elect with us, and Yari's group hopeful. You can read all of this on the front page and continue on page 6 of The Nation newspaper. Manufacturers' capacity utilization drops to 49% on high energy costs. It's making it to page 28. On subsidy palliative, we have more buses for Oyo State and free ride for pupils in Kwara. It's making it to page 6 of the Nation newspaper. And what that's much you can take on the front page of the Nation. The final paper for review this morning is the Vanguard. And on the Vanguard, the major headline reads, use June 12 as lesson to drive Nigeria's development. As a statement from Edwin Clark, IBB, Atiku, Obi, Ghana, and others. The writers there says Tinubu addresses the nation today. Activists protest high cost of living and meet at Abiola's Ikeja home. Nigeria should be crisis-free, says Clark. Democracy in bondage in Nigeria and incumbents must stop influencing polls, says Atiku. Gains of June 12 can deepen our democracy, says IBB. And finally, we have annulment, a tragic mistake, says Jerry Ghana. Well, like I said, you can read all of this on page 5 of the Vanguard newspaper. Don't take democracy for granted, Tinubu warns. It's also making it on the front page of the Vanguard newspaper. Moving above the masthead, we have 30 years after June 12 annulment, shocking revelations. The writers there says what Nigerians must know about the plot, and also 103 decrees promulgated in 1993 alone to regulate elections. Well, all of this you can read on page 13 of the Vanguard newspaper. Moving away from that, we have on failed transactions, banks and others trade blames as customers' agony persists. It's making it to page 8. And on fuel subsidies, school owners groan and seek government's assistance. That story you can get on page 9. On finance, we have economic uncertainties and insecurities drive up life insurance. The writers there says life policy rises by 18.2% and trends to continue as economic downturn persists, says operators. Do also read all of that on page 22. NMDPRA accuses ExxonMobil of oil theft is one you can read on page 12. And on the 10th Senate, we have plots to stop Yari Pickens as more senators back his ambition. He's making that story you can get on page 10. Okay, we have the Mr. and Mrs. column. Mrs. is speaking and she says, the lady has 2 kids for you and your mom confirmed it, yet you want me to believe it's not true? And Mr. replies and he says, there, anything is possible in this era of artificial intelligence. And then Mrs. replies and says, if I believe that, then my intelligence is artificial. That's quite an interesting one. But that's the much we can take on the front page of the Vanguard newspaper this morning. With that being said, we've taken all the headlines on the front pages of all the dailies I mentioned earlier. Remember that today is a Democracy Day, so I advise you to spend your day in a good and productive way, especially with today being a Monday, the first day of the week.